When Noah and his family first stepped onto dry land, the feeling of gratitude was immense. They had survived the flood, and the future ahead of them seemed promising. But before moving forward with their lives, Noah knew he had to do something crucial. He needed to offer an act of gratitude to God, the one who had guided, protected, and restored them. With a heart full of respect and reverence, Noah built an altar of stones, a simple yet meaningful space. He knew that this would be the moment to express his total dependence on God and also to affirm his faith in divine goodness, even in times of calamity. Noah carefully prepared for the sacrifice, selecting the best animals that had come out of the ark. With humility and zeal, he offered a sacrifice to God, which, according to the practice of that time, symbolized the giving of something valuable as an act of worship. When the flames rose, burning the sacrifice on the altar, Noah watched attentively, waiting. He knew that this moment was more than just a ritual. It was an expression of his trust in God, who had promised to preserve his life and that of his family. God, who had ordered the flood, was now bringing the future back to the world. Noah felt in his heart that God was about to do something great, something that would mark a new phase in the history of humanity. God then looked at Noah's sacrifice with pleasure. The aroma of the sacrifice rising to the heavens symbolized the sincerity of Noah's heart and his faithfulness. In response, God spoke to Noah, offering him a promise that would forever change the way humanity viewed its relationship with the earth. I will establish my covenant with you and with your children, and with all the living creatures that are with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures of the earth. Never again will I destroy the earth with a flood. Although the hearts of men will still be inclined toward evil, I will never again send another flood to destroy all that lives, said the Lord, his voice full of love and firmness. God's words were clear and powerful, filling Noah and his family with immense relief. They heard the promise that the destruction they had witnessed would not happen again. Humanity would have the chance to start over, and God was committed to this new beginning. It was a promise of mercy, a covenant of faith, that would transcend generations. And as a visible and eternal sign of this promise, God gave something extraordinary, the rainbow. He said to Noah, "This will be the sign of the covenant I make between me and you, and with every living creature that is with you, for all future generations. When I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears, I will remember the eternal covenant between God and all the creatures of the earth. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life." Noah looked up at the sky, and then something wonderful happened. The sky, which had previously been the stage for an unprecedented storm, now transformed into something beautiful. Dark clouds dissipated, and the sun, timidly, began to shine through them, creating a spectacle of colors on the horizon. The rainbow appeared, glowing with all its vibrant colors, stretching like a bridge between the sky and the earth. It was God's promise, visible to all, a clear message that he would fulfill his word. The covenant was sealed. Noah, his family, and all the animals around them gazed at the rainbow in admiration. To them, it was not just a beautiful formation of colors in the sky, but a tangible reminder of God's commitment to the world. It was as if God himself was saying, "I am faithful, and with this covenant, I protect the future of humanity and creation." Noah felt a deep peace in his heart. He knew that, despite human shortcomings and the uncertainties that the future might bring, God was with them. The rainbow would always be remembered as a symbol of hope and renewal. The same God who had sent destruction was now offering a new beginning, a chance to restore and protect the earth. And so, the covenant made by God with Noah was not just a promise for him and his family, but for all humanity and for all future generations. Creation, restored and renewed, was beginning a new phase, and God would be with them, guiding them, protecting them, and reminding them of the promise made through the sign of the rainbow, that the waters of destruction would never again cover the earth. Noah, with renewed faith, looked toward the future. He knew that God's covenant with humanity would continue alive in every generation. The rainbow would be the eternal sign of divine mercy and faithfulness. And with this sign, God guaranteed that the earth would never again face the destruction that the flood had brought. The future was now secure in God's hands, and humanity had a new chance to live in harmony with him. There was a time when the earth was far from the purpose for which it was created. Humanity, formed by God's loving hands, had strayed from the path he had set. The beauty and harmony that once marked creation had been replaced by darkness and destruction. Evil grew like a plague, contaminating the hearts and minds of the people. God, in his greatness, observed every detail of the earth. He saw how people turned against one another, committing acts of violence, dishonesty, and cruelty. Greed ruled their hearts, lying became second nature, and no one sought the truth anymore. Justice was forgotten, and men lived only to satisfy their selfish desires, without concern for the consequences. Even the youngest, who should have brought hope for the future, were already immersed in the corruption of their times. The days were dark. Every corner was a stage for injustice. God saw broken families, betrayed friendships, and entire peoples given over to practices that distanced them from him. Men and women had become so hardened that they didn't even remember who had created them. There was no room in their hearts for repentance or change. The violence was not only physical, but moral and spiritual. They had turned their backs on God's love, choosing to walk alone on twisted paths. The Creator was not indifferent to all of this. God did not just watch from afar, he felt. The Bible tells us that God's heart was deeply saddened. Imagine the Father, who loved every human being as unique, seeing the world he had formed with such care being destroyed by the very hands of those to whom he had given the gift of freedom. His heart, full of compassion, grew heavy with sorrow as he witnessed the chaos and evil growing without limit. But God, in his justice and holiness, knew he could not allow this to continue. The world was heading toward an abyss, and intervention was necessary. Corruption had reached such a point that, if nothing was done, no good would remain. Yet, even in the midst of the pain, God looked attentively to each soul. He still sought among all those hardened hearts someone who was different, someone who still heard his voice and walked in his ways. While the world was overwhelmed by corruption, there was a man who stood out as a beacon of hope amid the darkness. This man was Noah. Unlike everyone around him, he did not follow the paths of violence, lies, or selfishness that had spread across the earth. Noah was righteous and upright, someone who did what was right, even when no one else seemed to care. He was not influenced by the evil around him. Instead, he chose to walk with God. Noah was an ordinary man, but his faith was extraordinary. He not only believed in God but lived in a way that reflected that belief. In a world where no one else cared to listen to the Creator's voice, Noah dedicated his life to obeying and honoring God. He nurtured a close relationship with the Lord, as if he walked side by side with him at every step of his journey. And it was precisely this that caught God's attention. Amid billions of people, God saw in Noah someone different, someone who had not allowed evil to consume his heart. It was as if, looking out over the vastness of humanity, God found a faithful friend in whom he could trust. Imagine the contrast. While everyone lived for themselves, seeking power, pleasure, and wealth, Noah chose goodness, justice, and faith. He was not perfect, but his life was marked by a genuine desire to please God. This was something rare, precious, and God did not overlook it. It was then that the Lord made a crucial decision. Noah would be the instrument of a divine plan of redemption. God not only chose him to be saved from the judgment that was to come but also to be the means by which life on earth would be preserved and renewed. Noah would be the leader of a new chapter in the history of humanity. Noah was a righteous man in a dark time, where evil and corruption had spread across the earth like a shadow that seemed impenetrable. He lived with his family in obedience to God, standing out in a world that had completely strayed from the ways of the Lord. It was then, amid the silence of creation and the chaos of human actions, that God decided to take radical action to restore order. One night, perhaps under a starry sky or amidst a gentle breeze, God spoke to Noah with clarity and authority. His words were not of immediate comfort, but of warning and instruction. He revealed a plan that was both frightening and redemptive. The Creator of the universe was about to judge humanity. The earth would be covered with uncontrollable waters, a flood that would cleanse all the wickedness and violence that had taken over the hearts of men. But there was hope. God had chosen to save Noah, his family, and representatives of all living creatures. With precise details, God explained to Noah how to build the ark, a colossal vessel that would become the refuge of life in the midst of the impending judgment. Imagine the scene, Noah, listening attentively, as God described the exact dimensions of the ark. Make it 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, instructed the Lord. In modern measurements, that would be approximately 135 meters long, 22 meters wide, and 13 meters high. It was immense, larger than anything Noah or his generation had ever seen or imagined. Have you already heard the story of Noah? Have you checked if you're subscribed to the channel to not miss any videos like this one? The ark was to be made of cypress wood, a choice made by God himself for its durability and resistance to water. He detailed that the wood should be coated with pitch, both inside and out, to ensure it was completely waterproof. The roof, internal divisions, and even the placement of a window and a door on the side were described with divine perfection. Noah, without a doubt, was impressed. Building something of this magnitude in an age without modern technology was a colossal task. But he did not hesitate. He did not question the plan or the instructions. Instead, he trusted. He knew that God's words were true and that obedience was his only response. Upon hearing God's plan, Noah could already imagine the sound of axes cutting the wood, the effort of his sons carrying and shaping the planks, and the murmurs of the neighbors, who would surely mock him for undertaking such an unusual project. But still, he pressed on. Every hammer strike, every board placed, every drop of sweat falling from his brow represented not just hard work but also faith and obedience. The act of building the ark was, in itself, a testament to Noah's trust in God. The construction of the ark was not just about saving physical lives, it was a sign that God always offers a way of salvation to those who listen and trust in him. For Noah, each day of work was a reminder that the Lord is faithful and that he protects those who seek his justice, even when the whole world seems lost. And so, with the sound of wood being shaped and the echo of divine instructions in his mind, Noah pressed on. The ark, imposing and mysterious, began to take shape, not just as a shelter, but as a symbol of God's promise. Life would continue, even after the judgment. Noah was a man who did not let himself be influenced by the opinions of the masses. He lived in a time when evil had become the norm, and people had turned away from the ways of God. The idea of a flood, something so vast that it would cover the entire earth, seemed unthinkable. However, when God ordered Noah to build the ark, he did not hesitate. He did not ask for proof or further explanations. He simply trusted. Imagine how it was for Noah to announce to his family that they would build a massive boat on dry land. His neighbors, friends, and even strangers, upon hearing this, must have thought it was absurd. After all, the sky was still blue and the land dry. What could justify such an effort? But Noah knew that his obedience did not depend on the understanding of others. His faith was rooted in God's word. Day after day, Noah and his sons began working. The task was monumental. There were no advanced tools or modern technology to help them. Everything was done by hand, using cypress wood, as God had instructed. They had to cut, shape, and fit each plank. And, as if that weren't enough, Noah also had to cover the ark with pitch, both inside and out, to ensure it would be waterproof. Now imagine the scene. While Noah and his family worked under the hot sun, the people around them laughed. Some probably accused him of madness. "What are you doing, Noah?" they said. "Build a house, plant a crop, but a boat? And for what? There's no river around here." Others might have mocked even more intensively, pointing to the clear sky and scoffing at the idea of a flood. Despite this, Noah was unshaken. He understood that what God had commanded was bigger than any mockery or difficulty. He knew that obedience often requires courage, especially when what God asks of us doesn't make sense to the world. The construction of the ark took decades to complete. Decades. Imagine the commitment it took to continue day after day, even when nothing seemed to change around them. Noah and his family must have faced moments of exhaustion, doubt, and even frustration. But with every hammer strike and each plank placed, there was a clear message: they fully trusted in God. As Noah built, he also preached. Every day, he was a living testimony of God's patience and love. Noah knew that the flood was not just an act of destruction, but an opportunity for renewal. God was giving people time to repent and return to him. But the years passed, and the mockers continued to laugh. The heart of humanity had hardened, and few, if any, considered listening to what Noah was saying. Even so, he remained steadfast, teaching his sons the importance of obeying God, even when it meant swimming against the tide of public opinion. When, finally, the ark was finished, its immense structure seemed like a monument to faithfulness and obedience. Every detail, from the well-fitted wood to the pitch covering, was a reminder of Noah's commitment to God. The ark was not just a boat, It was a symbol of the covenant between God and man. Noah knew that time was running out. He trusted that just as God had given the instructions for the construction, he would also fulfill his promises. What seemed like madness to others was, for Noah, the certainty that God is always faithful to his word. Noah had become a peculiar figure in his community. While life went on with parties, business, and a nearly complete disregard for the future, he was there, day after day, hammering, sawing, and building a colossal structure. That huge ark was impossible to ignore. The sound of the hammers echoed throughout the neighborhood, drawing the attention of curious onlookers who couldn't understand what Noah was doing, or why. People came in groups to observe the work. At first, they arrived silently, with puzzled looks. But as time went on, the whispers turned into laughter and jokes began. "Hey, Noah," someone shouted. "Are you building a boat to sail on dry land? Where's the river?" Another mocked. "Maybe he's waiting for the clouds to start crying out of pity for him." These taunts didn't just come from strangers. Perhaps even acquaintances, neighbors, and longtime friends joined in the laughter. The mockery was constant and heavy. Noah's message, an alert about an impending flood and the need for repentance, seemed too absurd for them. After all, the sky was clear, the seasons passed as usual, and there was no sign of rain. God is going to destroy the world? They mocked. What kind of God would do that? You're out of your mind, Noah. And still, Noah carried on. He lifted his head, faced the mockers, and with patience and courage, explained again why he was doing the work. He spoke of the coming divine judgment, how God had commanded him to build the ark, and how it was an opportunity for those who wished to repent and seek refuge. But with every attempt to explain, the laughter grew louder. The mockery wasn't just verbal. There were some who threw stones toward the ark or danced around it, imitating Noah with hammers and imaginary tools, as if it were all a big joke. The construction of the ark became a spectacle, a distraction for passers-by. Meanwhile, Noah's sons, even though young and strong, faced their own inner struggles. It wasn't easy to hear people mock their father day after day. They might have wondered why God allowed this to happen, why it seemed so hard to convince people of the truth. But Noah, with his unwavering faith, encouraged them. "Don't worry about what they say," Noah told them. "God gave me a mission, and I will complete it. It doesn't matter whether they believe or not. We must do what's right." Still, the disdain from the wicked was hard to bear. In their disbelief, they continued with their lives as if nothing could change. They married, celebrated, built their homes, and tended to their businesses, completely ignoring Noah's warnings. They were so immersed in their routine that they couldn't, or wouldn't, imagine that a judgment could really happen. The days turned into years, and Noah continued, step by step, finishing the great work that God had commanded him. Every hammer blow was a response to the mockery, a testimony that his faith was greater than the laughter and insults. He knew that when the time came, the ark wouldn't just be a boat, but the difference between life and death for the... While the ark was almost finished, something extraordinary began to happen, something that no one could ignore. Noah and his family were used to the daily work, but one day, the sounds of the surrounding forest began to change. A peculiar sound mixed with the birds' songs and the wind in the trees, the sound of footsteps, many footsteps, with different rhythms and intensities. The animals were arriving. Under God's direction, creatures of all kinds began to appear, coming from all directions. It was as if nature itself were obeying an invisible command. Noah had been instructed by God about which animals should enter the ark. 2 of each kind, male and female, and, of some specific species, 7 pairs. But even though he had received this instruction, the real sight was something impressive. First, small groups of birds began to fly over the ark, gently landing nearby. Doves, sparrows, eagles, and even exotic birds Noah may have never seen. They came in pairs, as if they knew exactly what to do. Noah and his family looked up at the sky, amazed by the spectacle. Soon, the land animals began to appear. Deer leapt across the fields, followed by rabbits that nimbly ran through the grass. Behind them came larger animals, elephants, rhinoceroses, and giraffes walking at a steady pace, their imposing figures contrasting with the horizon. The sounds of hooves, paws, and claws filled the air. There was also a movement of caution among predators and prey, but, curiously, there was no chaos or violence. It was as if a divine instinct had calmed even the fiercest animals. Lions walked beside antelopes, wolves followed near lambs, and snakes slithered on the ground without causing panic. The order was clear: this was a sacred moment. For the neighbors who had mocked Noah, it was an absolute shock. They had laughed at him for years, but now, seeing creatures of all kinds heading peacefully towards the ark, many fell silent. How could they explain the inexplicable? Still, some tried to dismiss the event, calling it a coincidence or a meaningless curiosity. Others, however, began to watch with uneasy eyes. Noah's sons worked to organize the animals. Each pair was carefully guided into the ark, following the internal divisions Noah had built under God's guidance. The compartments were designed to accommodate all kinds of creatures, from the smallest, like insects and rodents, to the giants of the earth. It was a meticulous process. Each animal had its designated place, and Noah and his family worked hard to ensure everything was in order. They prepared suitable food for each species, storing grains, hay, dried meat, and even fruits as needed. The logistics were enormous, but everything flowed smoothly, as if invisible hands were helping them. For Noah, every step the animals took toward the ark was a confirmation of God's faithfulness. He didn't need to search for or capture the creatures; they came on their own, obeying a heavenly command only they could hear. The days passed, and the gathering continued. The ark, once just a large wooden structure, began to come to life. With the animals inside, the sound of the ark changed. Now it was filled with the roar of lions, the sound of hooves, the flapping of wings, and even the rumble of sleeping animals. When all the animals were finally settled, Noah realized that the time was drawing near. Every pair, every step, every movement had been orchestrated by God with perfection. He knew this was a sign. The great day was coming, and Noah and his family's patience and obedience were about to be rewarded. The moment Noah had been waiting for had arrived. The immense work of decades was complete. The ark, now finished, was not just a structure of wood and pitch but a symbol of obedience and faith. The animals were already inside, each in its place, settled as God had commanded. Now it was time for Noah and his family to take the next step. Noah gathered his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. He looked at each one of them with eyes full of determination and care. "It's time to enter the ark," he said. The words were simple but carried deep meaning. It was not just an invitation, it was an act of trust in the divine plan. As they walked toward the great structure, the sounds around them seemed to fade. Perhaps it was the silence of reverence or the weight of the moment. The neighbors, those who had once laughed and mocked, now watched in silence, many still in disbelief, but unable to ignore the solemnity of what was happening. The family climbed the ramp toward the ark's entrance. Every step seemed to echo in Noah's heart. He knew that, by crossing that threshold, they would be leaving behind everything they knew, their homes, their neighbors, the land where they had grown. But he also knew that, inside that ark, they were safe, protected by God's promise. As they entered, the ark seemed alive. The sounds of the animals filled the air, the flapping of wings, the bleating of sheep, the roaring of lions. But there was no chaos. Each creature seemed to understand that this was a special place, a refuge prepared by the Creator himself. Noah checked every detail, making sure the compartments were in order and there was enough space for his family and supplies. His wife and daughters-in-law helped organize the living areas, while Shem, Ham, and Japheth adjusted the final details of the ramp. Everything was ready. Then, something extraordinary happened. When everyone was inside, Noah and his family looked at the great door of the ark. It was still open, one last chance for anyone outside who wanted to enter. Noah took one last look outside, perhaps hoping someone would decide to join them. But no one came. Suddenly, a gentle breeze swept through the space, and the door began to move. It was not Noah who was closing it, nor his sons. The invisible hand of God was sealing the ark. The great door, heavy and immense, closed slowly with a deep, firm sound. Noah and his family felt God's presence in that act. It was not just a door closing, it was divine protection being placed over them. Outside, the world continued. The people who had laughed at Noah now looked at the ark with a mix of curiosity and unease. Some may have started to question their own choices, but they still did not move. Inside the ark, Noah gathered his family. They knew they were under God's care, but the reality of what was to come also weighed on their hearts. It was a moment of silence and prayer, a moment of total surrender to God's will. With the door closed, the ark was now completely isolated from the outside world. When the door of the ark closed and Noah and his family were safe inside, a profound silence filled the air. They were safe within the ark, but outside, the world was about to be transformed in an unimaginable way. It was the beginning of an event that would change the course of humanity's history forever. In the first moments, nothing seemed to happen. The sky, which had been clear and serene, began to show signs of change. Dark, heavy clouds began to form on the horizon. It was as though the sky itself was preparing to release something that had been held back for a long time. It wasn't a simple storm, but something much bigger. And then, the first drops of rain fell. It was something unknown to everyone on Earth, for until that moment, the water that irrigated the land came from underground springs or dew. But now, the sky was releasing the waters in a supernatural way. The first drops were gentle, but soon they grew heavier, hitting the ark with increasing force. Noah, inside the ark, looked out. The first drops of rain, like a sign of the beginning of judgment, began to fall relentlessly. The earth, once firm and stable, began to tremble under the first signs of the storm. The rain didn't stop, but continued to fall, unyielding. And then, a second event of great magnitude happened. The underground springs, which had been dormant beneath the earth until then, began to gush forth. Water sprang from the earth as if the very foundation of the world was opening up. The waters began to rise, flooding the fields, rivers, and even cities. The sound of the rising waters was a distant roar, but over time, it became louder and closer. The world was being swallowed by a sea of turbulent waters. With each passing hour, the waters rose higher. The trees, once firmly planted in the ground, began to be consumed. The mountains that seemed eternal were being covered. Outside the ark, people began to realize that something far beyond human understanding was happening. Those who had ignored Noah's warnings, who had mocked his faith and disregarded the admonitions, were now desperately trying to find refuge. They saw the water rising rapidly, flooding their homes, their lands, swallowing everything they had once known. It was too late. There was no way to escape. Divine judgment had been declared, and no one was prepared for what was happening. Inside the ark, Noah's family was gathered together. They embraced each other and prayed, feeling the waters rising around them, but trusting that they were protected by the hand of God. For the 40 days and 40 nights that followed, the waters never ceased. It wasn't a passing rain, but a continuous flood, a torrent of water that relentlessly covered the earth. The ark, which seemed fragile at first, now floated like an island in the vast ocean that covered the world. Noah looked through the window, seeing nothing but water on all sides. The sun was nowhere to be seen, and darkness seemed to dominate. But despite the fierce storm, the ark remained steady, gently floating on the turbulent waters. The roar of the waters outside was unceasing. The first creatures began to disappear, the cities were submerged, and the land, once full of life, was now a vast sea. The world was being renewed, and the only lives that remained were those inside the ark. Inside it, Noah knew he was fulfilling the divine purpose. He looked at his family and, with a look of confidence, said, "We are safe, for God is with us." But still, the weight of the situation was immense. The flood wasn't just a natural disaster. It was the fulfillment of God's promise to purify the earth. When Noah and his family first stepped onto dry land, the feeling of gratitude was immense. They had survived the flood, and the future ahead of them seemed promising. But before moving forward with their lives, Noah knew he had to do something crucial. He needed to offer an act of gratitude to God, the one who had guided, protected, and restored them. With a heart full of respect and reverence, Noah built an altar of stones, a simple yet meaningful space. He knew that this would be the moment to express his total dependence on God and also to affirm his faith in divine goodness, even in times of calamity. Noah carefully prepared for the sacrifice, selecting the best animals that had come out of the ark. With humility and zeal, he offered a sacrifice to God, which, according to the practice of that time, symbolized the giving of something valuable as an act of worship. When the flames rose, burning the sacrifice on the altar, Noah watched attentively, waiting. He knew that this moment was more than just a ritual. It was an expression of his trust in God, who had promised to preserve his life and that of his family. God, who had ordered the flood, was now bringing the future back to the world. Noah felt in his heart that God was about to do something great, something that would mark a new phase in the history of humanity. God then looked at Noah's sacrifice with pleasure. The aroma of the sacrifice rising to the heavens symbolized the sincerity of Noah's heart and his faithfulness. In response, God spoke to Noah, offering him a promise that would forever change the way humanity viewed its relationship with the earth. I will establish my covenant with you and with your children, and with all the living creatures that are with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures of the earth. Never again will I destroy the earth with a flood. Although the hearts of men will still be inclined toward evil, I will never again send another flood to destroy all that lives, said the Lord, his voice full of love and firmness. God's words were clear and powerful, filling Noah and his family with immense relief. They heard the promise that the destruction they had witnessed would not happen again. Humanity would have the chance to start over, and God was committed to this new beginning. It was a promise of mercy, a covenant of faith, that would transcend generations. And as a visible and eternal sign of this promise, God gave something extraordinary, the rainbow. He said to Noah, "This will be the sign of the covenant I make between me and you, and with every living creature that is with you, for all future generations. When I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears, I will remember the eternal covenant between God and all the creatures of the earth. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life." Noah looked up at the sky, and then something wonderful happened. The sky, which had previously been the stage for an unprecedented storm, now transformed into something beautiful. Dark clouds dissipated, and the sun, timidly, began to shine through them, creating a spectacle of colors on the horizon. The rainbow appeared, glowing with all its vibrant colors, stretching like a bridge between the sky and the earth. It was God's promise, visible to all, a clear message that he would fulfill his word. The covenant was sealed. Noah, his family, and all the animals around them gazed at the rainbow in admiration. To them, it was not just a beautiful formation of colors in the sky, but a tangible reminder of God's commitment to the world. It was as if God himself was saying, "I am faithful, and with this covenant, I protect the future of humanity and creation." Noah felt a deep peace in his heart. He knew that, despite human shortcomings and the uncertainties that the future might bring, God was with them. The rainbow would always be remembered as a symbol of hope and renewal. The same God who had sent destruction was now offering a new beginning, a chance to restore and protect the earth. And so, the covenant made by God with Noah was not just a promise for him and his family, but for all humanity and for all future generations. Creation, restored and renewed, was beginning a new phase, and God would be with them, guiding them, protecting them, and reminding them of the promise made through the sign of the rainbow, that the waters of destruction would never again cover the earth. Noah, with renewed faith, looked toward the future. He knew that God's covenant with humanity would continue alive in every generation. The rainbow would be the eternal sign of divine mercy and faithfulness. And with this sign, God guaranteed that the earth would never again face the destruction that the flood had brought. The future was now secure in God's hands, and humanity had a new chance to live in harmony with him.